Howdy world, welcome back to the RC Air Experience, episode 25, first one of 2025. That's interesting. And
Yep.
we have the amazing Bert Garrison joining us today. And I say amazing, Bert, because I did some research on you over my day today. And I knew who you were, but it's really cool to have you on. You're a pretty outstanding fellow, and you've done some very cool things in your lifetime so far. So,
well, I
welcome.
appreciate you guys having me on, and I enjoy telling my story. I'm just a normal dude that puts his pants on like everybody else, but I do appreciate the accolades. But I don't live for the accolades. But it's a great chance, this podcast, to tell my story and help people that want to be model aviators as well as full-scale aviators. So
Right.
Cool.
And with your history and everything, we're going to get into that a little bit. Do you see a lot of that? Do you see a progression of kids who get interested in model aviation and then end up going into general aviation, or is it kind of the other way around? They get interested in general aviation and then they start playing with models. Like, what's your experience?
I think they start with models. That's been my experience. I was an airline pilot for 22 years, and flying with guys, they'd find out I was into models, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I started into models too." So, and then in the Air Force, when I was in the Air Force, there were a lot of guys that I flew with that started in models control line or radio control. But there is obviously the other way. The hardest guy I ever taught to fly was a full-scale pilot that wanted to fly models. He thought he could do it on his own. And after 3 crashed airplanes, he decided to listen and let me help him. But yeah.
Wow.
It's funny you think there'd be some direct correlation there, but I've actually been working with one of my really good friends, and he used to be a full-scale commercial pilot, and it's taken him about 4 years of really like us working together a lot for him to be totally self-sufficient now, and it's interesting that the crossover is not really there.
Well, the fundamentals are the same, right? So the lift, drag, how the airplane works. It's the fact that you are in a fixed position as an RC guy looking at an airplane instead of sitting in the seat. It's way easier to fly a full-scale airplane. There's just a lot more at risk when you do it, but it's way easier to fly full scale than it is to fly models.
Yeah, I see, and that explains my issue to a T right there.
Exactly.
I stopped being able to fly line of sight because I just started flying FPV so much. And people are like, it's hard taking off and landing FPV. And it's like, yeah, those are probably the most challenging parts. But once you're up, it's easier to fly FPV than it is to fly line of sight. I'm in the plane. Left is left, right is right, up is down, down is up.
It's absolutely easier. And I do a bit of that as well. My YouTube channel that we can talk about, I just started January 1st. It's something I've been putting off for years. I think I have 100 videos in the queue to be released. They were on Vimeo, but I do a lot of chase with a FPV, with a DJI FPV drone, and it's way easier. It is so much easier. In fact, I dabbled in freestyle quads for a little bit just to see if I liked it. And the guy was like, "Oh, you're not going to have a problem. If you can fly line of sight, this is going to be easy." And he was right.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. So when you go back to line of sight again, it's like learning a new skill.
I lose orientation now. I can't do it.
You can't.
I actually I get frustrated and I give up. So what I'll do sometimes is like, all right, like I have a couple of planes that are pretty easy to fly, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna pop my goggles up and I'm gonna fly a line of sight for a little bit. And the first couple of turns, like, nope, put my goggles back down.
It's like training wheels on a bicycle. You're afraid to take them off.
Yeah,
but you're gonna have to take them off and fly. Just do a whole day of just line of sight flying.
I just have to do it. I'm tired of crashing stuff, so now I'm just like, man, just fly it FPV. it is what it is, and it's starting to become more acceptable. So I fly FPV fixed wing, and I feel like it's starting to become a little bit more acceptable at clubs and stuff too.
Good.
Yeah,
Because
it's
we've definitely been vilified all across the spectrum. So
yeah.
and I've been doing it since '74, and let me tell you, this old guy is shocked that we even have to talk about FAA regulations flying model airplanes. So
Yeah, I know.
anyway,
Bert, you said you started your YouTube channel, like you started posting on it like just this past January, like just
January 1st.
yeah.
So Ali Machinchi,
Yeah.
who's one of the reasons why I'm on the scene, is because he saw me, liked me, and we got to
Cool.
be friends. And he's like, you need to make a social media presence. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I know I do. I've been wanting to do it. So before he left, we had a heart to heart, and I said, on January 1st, I'm doing it. I'm pulling the trigger.
Awesome.
So I set up a whole bunch. I started my Instagram. I had
Mhm.
2 other Instagram channels, but I started a model Instagram. I changed my Facebook page so that it reflects modeling. And then I started my YouTube channel. And it's Bert Garrison RC.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to say that it's almost 300 subscribers in 13 days. What's today's the
Yeah,
13th, right?
you're doing awesome.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
I'm not, trust me, I'm not bragging about it. I'm tickled to death that I've hit, a nerve that people want to see certain things. I'm more of a event videographer.
Mhm.
I try to, you know, we've all done the clip through the videos where the guy films a whole flight and you just want to see the takeoff and the landing and maybe some cool aerobatics, right? You don't want to see the whole 5-minute flight. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
try to do that. I try to do that with my videos. And I've been filming airplanes for many, many, many years. So the stuff that's coming out right now is from 21 to 23. I did not do
Wow.
any video in 24. I did
Yeah.
not pick up a camera. I was concentrating on my jet stuff. But 25, I'm going to start going to more events, and it's going to be camera time. And
Cool.
I'm seeing jets are popular, but what I'm really seeing that is popular are warbirds.
Mhm.
And my most popular video is a short of a T-28 Carbon Z with a sound module in it flying by at dusk. It has 17,000 views.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you weren't flying that. That was somebody else's
No, I
plane, I'm
was
assuming.
flying it.
Oh, you were?
My
Oh,
buddy
cool.
was videoed with a camera. It's dusk. Go check it out. It doesn't look real, but it is.
Yeah.
I assure you, it's real. The sound module in that airplane is incredible. And
Huh.
on a side note, when I brought it up to Ali, he's like poo-pooing it. He's like, "Nah, don't do that. That's stupid." I'm telling you right now, I have the most outstanding comments on that video because it is
Yeah.
just the sound of it is cool. We got an engine start sequence, we got a fast flyby, a slow flyby, and a taxi. And right now, the dusk flyby is got the most hits. So I'm
Wow.
Very cool.
so I'm gonna
That is,
do more warbird stuff for sure.
John, I think it's time we reach out to Allie.
Well, he's over in Europe land now, so
We've done what, 3 different time zones? I think we can make it work.
You can make
probably
I think we can make it work, right?
it would be nice to have him on actually after he
Oh,
made
yeah.
the big change. So
He's
Yeah.
an outstanding advocate for the
Yeah.
hobby. That's for sure.
absolutely.
We'll have Bert put in a good word for us.
I will.
Yeah.
I will.
So Bert, I see that you got into jets not too long ago.
That is correct. And I'm trying to remember. I think it's 21. It's either 21 or 22 when I got my waiver. I sent Anthony my Ranger, my Boomerang Ranger, and in fact,
Oh yeah.
the reason I even found your channel, Jonathan, was because I was learning about turbines, flying jets. And I was searching for engine starts, for installation videos, and your videos showed up. And so I've been a subscriber ever since. But
Cool.
I woke up. People would always say, "Oh, you flew the SR. You should get into turbines." And I'm like, "Nah, I'm never going to have a jet. It's not my thing." Then one morning I woke up. It was like I just started. Yeah, there she is, the Ranger. Yeah,
Nice.
that was my waiver jet.
Cool.
And an Air Force buddy, Tom Perry, he gave me my waiver down in South Carolina at the Fire Tower Field in South Carolina. But yeah, so I just started digging in to everything about turbines. What do I need to do? How do I go about it? That was my, everybody kept saying the Ranger. This is before all the other good trainers came out, like the MB339 and stuff. So I still have that jet. It's down in the basement. I need to fly it. But it's kind of a pain. You've owned one, just getting the CG and the batteries in there and everything. It's not very conducive. I bought a bifurcated tank because that huge fuel tank was just so big and you never filled it up. So I got a bifurcated tank, and it's a 2/3 fuel and 1/3 smoke. And I don't give it enough credit. I probably only have 3 hours on that motor, but I enjoyed it so much. Learning how to fly. It was just like a pattern plane to me. It wasn't hard. So,
I've owned, I'm assuming if you've done some research, you're familiar with the Ultra Flash, but I've owned like 7 or 8 Ultra Flashes. And I finally sold my last one a couple of years ago, and I'm like, I'll probably never own another one. And then after owning the Ranger, I actually like the way the Ranger flies better than all the Ultra Flashes I've ever owned. Now, the Ultra Flashes are strong, but the Ranger is just such a good
yeah,
flying plane.
it's very honest. It
Hmm.
was a perfect waiver jet for me.
Yeah.
Everything works. I've gotten so many jets since then that I'm having problems with the gear controller or if
Yeah.
it's got LEDs, the LED thing. Anyway, everything in this airplane to this day still works. Got a King Tech 102 G4 in it.
Mhm. Yeah, the only knock I have for the Ranger, and obviously you know this, is when you're putting it together, the connectors are hard to get in the little holes, and you got to drop the gear, and it's just a bit of a nightmare that way. But good plane overall.
But
So
thanks to your video tip of using ash locks and putting the male
yeah,
side, I could just hook a manual. I made a jumper for the
exactly,
manual controller and just suck the gear up whenever I want. So
exactly, yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
now I see you. It looks like you own a BDX.
Okay, yes, that's okay. I mean, what can I say? What can I say about the BDX? So once again, we'll bring Allie into the story. We're at
Yeah.
Jets Over the Heartland, which I know it's a haul for you, Jonathan. I don't know so
Mhm.
much about Anthony, but that's a Winnemac, Indiana event that my good friend Tim Redelman puts on every year. It's a wonderful field. It's asphalt. It's got lots of grass. We actually take off with other planes on the grass, perpendicular to the asphalt. Anyway,
Yeah.
I digress. So I told Allie, I said, if you ever want to sell the BDX, I'm interested. And then he goes, I'll let you know. And then a day later, he comes over to me in the hangar and he's like, here's what I got in it. Make me an offer. And I did. And so that is, I guess he's had like 4 of them. So I think that was number
Yeah.
2 of his. It's
Yeah.
the one, okay, back to my shameless plug for my YouTube channel. It's the one in the EA playlist where Allie does the routine and then slides dead stick at the
Yeah.
end. That's the airplane I bought from him. So
Yeah.
Okay.
love that airplane. You've got one,
Yeah.
Jonathan. Gosh, I can't say enough good things about the BDX. Um, I was at Jets over Kentucky with my father. We just went there to watch, and I did some video. And I knew Allie, and Allie knew me, but we weren't good friends yet.
Hmm.
And I see this green plane. It's not mine, but it's the same scheme. And I'm like, what is that? It looks like a BD5J. And I
Yeah.
see Allie pushing it back, and I go, that looks like a BD5J. And he's like, close. We call it the BDX. It's a project I'm working on with EA. And I said, that is really cool. Cause he did the routine where he was flying freaking fast and then slow, low to the ground, carving turns. I'm like, that's my kind of airplane.
Oh yeah.
So then fast forward, I think it was 2 years when I saw it for the first time. And it was just coming out on the market. And people, people looked at it like a stink bug. It's like, this is, but
yeah, when I did that first video, when I was at Kentucky Jets, that was the first year it kind of was starting to come out, and then everybody was poo-pooing it. And then I think once some guys started getting them and flying them, it was just the whole story changed, right? So
it's their grand slam. It really is.
It's a funny looking plane though. It is a little bit.
Well, I mean, there's funnier looking airplanes out there.
It's different looking for sure.
Yeah. I won't start bashing other airplanes. I'm not, but there are some other ones that look more hideous than the BDX.
Oh no, but I can understand why people, when it first came out, were poo-pooing on it, because you first look at it and you're like, what is that thing?
But if you look at it with squinted eyes, like it's a BD5J, then it all makes sense. In fact, Allie had the Coors Light one with the
big pitot tube sticking out the nose.
Yep. So I have a BDX. I have I don't know, you can see it sitting back there. I've got the Picaro 2.0.
Oh, that's what I figured, because I can see it on your YouTube channel here. So.
Yeah, that's the one I'm holding. That I'm telling you, that is a close second for me.
Yeah.
I'm jonesing to fly it again. I only got to fly it a couple times, and then it got too cold. Excuse me.
But what engine did you put in your Picaro?
That's a 130 King Tech 130. Okay. Just Gen 4.
Yeah.
I am not a fast jet flyer. It just doesn't appeal to me. But at the goading of Allie pushing me along, he's like, just leave it wide open. I'm like, okay. So I did. And I had a blast flying. It was so easy to fly around wide open.
I find that kind of interesting that you're not a fast jet flyer, considering your background.
Right. A lot of people say that. And here's my thing. The flying isn't just for me, it's for the audience. And there's only so much high-speed circuits back and forth, zooming across the field, going out of sight and coming back that you can do, and it gets boring. It's sort of like and these guys have a lot of skill. It's like the 3D helicopter guys that are smack 3D guys. It's an awesome skill to have, but after about 2 minutes, I'm done watching it. I want to see guys carve up and do a whole and this is my style. And I'm not stealing it from Allie, but that's why we got along, because he flies the same way I like to. He's a way better pilot than I am, but let's do some fast stuff and show the airplane's capabilities. Let's go max perform, and then let's go max perform on the slow side. Look how slow it flies. Look how smooth it carves. It's just my flying style. There are a lot of guys that just like to go as fast as they can for a full tank of gas. And that's their niche, and it's not mine.
Yeah.
So, Bert, we touched on it briefly. You alluded to it a little while ago. You said something about an SR71, and then I made a comment about you flying fast. So, for those that don't know you, let's touch into your background just a little bit and
okay, well, if we want to go from day one, then let's do that. I can whip through it real fast. So and we'll talk models and full scale because they go hand in hand with me. So I got my first radio controlled airplane in 1974, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it was called, but it was a shoulder wing trainer, and it wasn't it was made by some guy in Texas. It had like a Lanier. If anybody's familiar with Lanier models, they had that vinyl over the foam kind of wing. It was kind of heavy. I couldn't find a picture of it. But it had a KMB 40, which I sent you a picture of the KMB 40 with the flow through muffler, with a Perry carburetor. And I took lessons from a guy named Ed Goodgame in Woodruff, South Carolina, not far from where Joe Nall is. And I showed up on a Sunday morning. I was getting ready to solo, and my dad and there's a good old KMB 40. A lot of old guys will remember that motor. It had the baffle in it that would shut down the exhaust port, but you took that baffle out. It was linked to the throttle arm, and it put the muffler on it. But anyway, Ed Goodgame never showed up, and we had unpacked the airplane. I had it ready to fly. I was flying on 75 640 with a Kraft 5-channel radio. And my dad's like, just fly it. You know how to do it. And I took off and crashed. Then I got yelled at. And so
for reference, Bert, how old were you in? So then 1974,
74, I would have been 13, 14
okay,
years
cool.
old. Yeah. And I didn't have I was cutting grass. So the way I was able to afford an RC was Dad paid for half and I had to pay for half. So the radio, I paid for half and he paid for half. You know, everything was halvesies, and I cut lawns to get the money to do it. And because I couldn't cut enough lawns to replace the trainer, I got a square soarer, which I think I added a picture of. If anybody remembers Airtronics square soarer, and I went to the local golf course, which is down the street from my house, and threw it down the fairway and just got it to the point where, there was the old Craft closed gimbal, heavy as heck, that flight pack, and that was 4.8 volts on those servos that moved like molasses. If you see one of those servos today, you're like, how did you fly? Anyway, I included this because I know there are guys that one want to see it and two will remember it. But the square soarer, I would throw as hard as I could and then get to the point where I could do a 180 and land back up the hill. And then I put a power pod on it and 049, and I would launch it and fly it. I think the motor was a Golden Bee 049. I think it ran for 2 minutes and, had no throttle. So you just climb out and then soar around and land. I did that until I got proficient. No more instruction. I didn't get any more instruction from Goodgame. I was on my own at this point. Then when I became a senior in high school, I had to get a real job, Dad said. So I worked at a restaurant and I made enough money that I took the Piper Blue Sky program, which was $260 in 1976 to solo. So they gave you 10 hours for $260 in a Warrior. And I decided, there's the square soarer with the power pod. That's not mine, but that's a representation of the Airtronics square. So great kit. Anyway, they had a Citabria there at Greenville downtown in Greenville, South Carolina. And I talked the guy into let me do the Blue Sky program in the Citabria because my uncle, who was a full-scale pilot, said, if you don't learn to fly a tail dragger, you're not learning to fly. So I soloed when I was 16 in the Citabria, and then flew all my restaurant money out until I went to college and didn't have any money, and never got my license because I just couldn't afford it. Went to the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, and I left the Citadel with a navigator slot to undergraduate nav training, but I wanted a pilot slot, but they didn't have any. So I ended up going to navigator training in Sacramento, California. And out of there, I became an electronic warfare officer, and I flew the EF-111. I should have put a picture of that in there. They're all in museums now, but the EF-111 was what they called it the Spark Vark because it was a jamming airplane. So instead of dropping bombs, we threw Trons. Well, when I was in the F-111 program, I applied for pilot training and I got accepted. So I went to Williams Air Force Base and got accepted, went to pilot training, graduated, and flew and ended up in the B-52 up in Fairchild, Washington. I flew the B-52 G, and yeah, that's it.
That's an interesting looking airplane. That
I probably
EF-1.
flew that very airplane because there was only like 20 of them. The one I know, there's one at the Dayton Museum. I know I flew. It's sitting there. Yeah, it was a cool airplane. It could go
You've
fast.
gotten to fly some pretty interesting planes, huh?
I was very fortunate.
Yeah, like how did you just like win the pilot lottery? I mean,
Well, so the Air Force is kind of screwed up. If you don't want a career in the Air Force, you could do a bunch of cool stuff. But if you wanted to become a general or a colonel, you had to do what they said. Well, I didn't want to do what they said, so I got to fly a bunch of cool stuff. In retrospect, I did what I should have done because it made me a well-rounded aviator. So
Nice.
I was a right seat guy in this airplane. Went to pilot training, got a B-52. I flew the B-52 for 4 years and left there as an instructor pilot, and decided I'd had it with the Air Force, and went to applied to T-43s, which is a 737-200 down in Randolph, Texas, navigator training, because I wanted a type rating so I can go to the airlines. And I got it. So I went down there and did every seat in that airplane and applied to Southwest Airlines in 1996, and they turned me down. And as a joke, a buddy of mine, Pat Falterman, he threw this assignment because everybody was applying to Southwest in that squadron because we flew the 737, and he was feeling sorry for me, but he wanted to cheer me up, so he throws this thing down and laughs. He goes, "There you go, apply there." And I looked at it, and it was the job announcement for the SR71. And I looked at it and I said, "Hey, I have combat aircraft time. I have air refueling time. I have the 1,000 or 1,500. I can't remember how many hours they wanted. I can apply. I might not get it, but you'll never know if you don't apply." So
Nice.
me and 300 other guys applied for this job. And
So when you guys applied, did it actually say like you were going to be flying the SR71? That like it actually told you all that
yes,
stuff?
it was a job
Okay.
announcement. They were looking for a pilot for the SR71.
Wow, cool.
And you had to have air refueling, you had to have combat aircraft time, and there's a bunch of hoops you had to jump through. You had to do an official photo in your dress uniform, and everything had to be in a binder, and you mailed it off to the unit. And 2 months went by and I didn't hear anything, but I was like, yeah, oh, well, that's cool. At least I tried. And so I'm thinking, I see an announcement for the U2, and I'm like, hey, I wonder if they'll send my package over to the U2 guys. So I call the squadron, and Colonel Goodmanson answers. He's the det commander there at Edwards. And I said, Colonel Goodmanson, I was wondering, since I didn't get the SR, if you could send my package to the U2. And he goes, "Oh, you don't want to fly the SR?" I said, "No, sir, I do, but it's been 2 months. I just assumed that I didn't get it." He goes, "Well, I was just getting ready to call you. Congratulations." What? So long story short, I got orders to Edwards Air Force Base, moved out there, spent a long time in the simulator, which everybody can go see the sim that we flew. The sim is in the Plains of Fame in Dallas, Texas. It's the very simulator that we all trained in. It doesn't move. It just has limited motion. It's not like $1 million sim that we have today. It was mostly a procedures trainer. I think I got 200 hours in the simulator before I set foot in the airplane.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then got to fly the airplane. My backseater was Domingo Ocho Terrena, a great guy, smart guy. He was a flight test navigator at Edwards, so he was already there. He won on the navigator side, which is called the RSO, Reconnaissance System Officer. He sat in the back in the high-speed closet, they called it. No stick, 2 little windows beside his head. That's all he had. But he was the guy that ran the navigation system and the cameras and all that stuff. So we were seeing. Go ahead.
When you were selected, just for reference, how many SR-71s were still in service at this point?
There's 2.
it was close to end of life, right? For like,
No, there's
so how
two.
many?
Okay, so the SR, there's a guy, and I don't remember his name. Him and his backseater were the last guys to fly the airplane in I think it was 1989. So now I trumped that because I came on the scene in 97 and flew it until the last flight on October 10th of 97. So they closed the program down in 89. Then Desert Storm broke out. You guys remember 90,
Yeah.
91, Desert Storm, and Congress wanted the SR back. The SR is extremely good at flying over hostile territory and mapping in a matter of minutes what could take hours. Well, and people are like, well, satellites can do it. Well, spy satellites are polar orbit, so they can slice as the Earth turns, they go around. So you have to wait 24 hours to go see the area of interest again for a satellite. So the SR was good at going downtown, taking from 80,000 feet, you could do 100,000 square miles in minutes on wet film. We had wet film and we had radar, ASARs, a synthetic aperture. It looks like green pixel. It's like a black and white photo, only green is what ASAR's radar gives you. You can see fence posts. You could see the radar on the SR could not read it. They say read a license plate, but if you threw a license plate on the ground, the cameras and the radar could see there was a rectangular object. You couldn't read it.
80,000 feet.
Yes.
Holy.
So I get excited talking about this because it's an amazing feat of engineering. The windows in the airplane were made out of quartz glass. The windows that the cameras, I'm sorry, I talk with my hands and my hands are like way out.
No, you're good.
Like,
You're good.
So the chines are where the camera glass is, and it's thick. I mean, I know it's more than 4 inches thick. It's probably close to 6 inches thick. Perfect optical clarity. And those windows come out of the airplane and they go in special heaters. They have to be preheated before the mission, and they put them in hot. Wow. Because once you get up to temperature, if the windows were cold, they would have distortions and you couldn't shoot through the glass.
Wow.
So there was, and I don't, guys can look this up, and I'm not a plethora of knowledge when it comes to little tidbits, but the maintenance required for 1 hour of flying was something like 7 hours of maintenance for every hour you flew, or it could be more. So that's what ultimately killed the program, was the cost of keeping it flying, not the actual airplane. But what were we talking about? And I got sidetracked. I don't remember. It's all really cool stuff.
Your progression.
Yeah, we were talking about your progression. I asked how many were in service.
Oh, right. So in 95, Congress said we want the SR back, and they gave Lockheed a budget. Lockheed pulled 2 of them out of storage. 976 was the one that I flew the last. It's the one that there's all the pictures of, because Ted Carlson, world-renowned aviation photographer, just so happened to show up absolutely by accident on the last flight. Nobody knew it was the last flight. We didn't know it was the last flight, but Ted Carlson got to ride in the T-38 and fly formation and take pictures of me and Ocho. So all those pictures that I sent you of the SR flying, those are me and my backseater when we did our solo flight. And they called it a solo flight because neither one of us were flying with an instructor. That's when they kicked us out of the nest and said, you guys are good to go. Because I flew the 2-seat version with Gil Luloff, my instructor, until I was good. And Ocho flew in the back seat with his instructor. And then once they said, okay, they had a big powwow around the table and they said, yeah, let's let these guys go solo. And so we did the solo flight. And then the next flight was this one, and that you see the pictures of. And that's when Ted Carlson was there. So we wouldn't even have pictures of the last flight if Ted hadn't showed up. So it's very fortunate that he documented the very last flight of the U.S. Air Force SR. Now, keep in mind, I
Very
keep saying
cool.
U.S. Air Force because NASA still had an A
Mhm.
model and a B model. That's me on final, gear down,
Wow.
coming in on final. So they're flying on the wing there. He's snapping out at the left side of the canopy in the T-38. That's over Edwards Air Force Base. That's the 15,000-foot runway that runs off into the dry lake bed. And you can see in this picture, it's kind of interesting.
This is
If
a
you
cool picture.
yeah, that's a
Wow.
really great picture. They popped up over top of us and rolled inverted a la Top Gun. Only
That's
he
an
didn't.
amazing
I don't think he
picture.
flipped the bird. Of course, I couldn't see it. But yeah, that's a very nice picture. I
Yeah,
actually
that's a,
have a print of that he gave me. That's the break
Wow.
in the break over Edwards Air Force Base because that's where we were. So I'm in a left break coming around.
now these are the cameras right here. These things that you're talking about is
Yeah, I think
right where my
so.
mouse is.
There's some. I don't remember. The camera glass is big, and I can't tell by that picture. It's too tiny on my screen, but yes, that is a window. That is a
Yeah,
camera.
there's one there and one there.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Yes, sir. There was a camera on either side. And so not only did they have to heat the glass so that thing could shoot through clear, but the camera did what was called squinting. So Ocho would set in our Mach number and the camera lens would squint. It would move so that there wouldn't be any ground blur as the shutter fired.
Wow.
Because if you ever when you're in an airliner and you look out the window, it looks like the earth's not moving, right? You're not.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you took a pencil, and I tell kids to do this, a pencil or your finger, and you point at something against the glass on the ground, you actually can see how fast you're going because you can watch your finger
Oh.
tracking across the ground. And so the camera, with it zoomed in, it has to squint, it has to move to capture that image so that it doesn't blur. And I can't remember the name of the camera, but it had a shutter that rolled from horizon to horizon like that. And so it would swipe a whole swath of like 75 miles from
Wow.
left to
Wow.
right as you flew. And the camera would have to adjust for that. It was all analog. There was no digital. It was all wheels and gears and motors, and it's an amazing. The technology was amazing. It really was.
Yeah. For the
In one of your
time.
videos I was watching today, it said couple cool things. Obviously, you touched on this in your video, but everybody thought that the SR71 used so much fuel on takeoff that it needed to be refueled. But you covered in your video that it would lose about 50 gallons on takeoff and on the runway and stuff. And then you would take off because you're only taking off with like half fuel or a reduced amount of fuel, correct?
That is correct. So the plane could hold 80,000 pounds of fuel. That's if you do the math, it's around 12,000 gallons. It's more than you'll
Okay.
burn in your car in your lifetime
Yeah.
when you think about it. So 80,000 pounds of fuel it would hold, but we have a thing in full scale aviation called balanced field length. And that's the point at which you could either take off, lose an engine, and stop in the remaining runway, or
Oh, okay.
take off, lose an engine, and continue on one engine.
Yeah.
So that happens at your decision speed, and you want those speeds to be really close together because you'd rather keep it on the ground. You don't really want to take a bad airplane airborne. So to
Yeah.
get that balanced field length to the point where it was safe, we only put, I want to say 60,000 pounds. I can't remember. So we didn't
Okay.
have full tanks. It wasn't
Mhm.
because it leaked out. It was just because we needed the safety margin for weight, the gross weight of the airplane, so we could take off and still fly
Mhm.
on one motor. And then we'd go hit the tanker. And that was, man, most guys got washed out of the program because they couldn't air refuel. It is the
Yeah.
hardest. I've refueled the B-52 and this. I didn't get to refuel any other airplane, but I'll tell you, from talking to other guys and my own experience, that is the hardest thing you'll ever do in an airplane is refuel this SR71
And on this
because
plane, it's your refueling probe is like midship, isn't it?
you see the little square window behind the main cockpit. So the little
Oh,
square
wow.
window, that's Ocho's window. The
Yeah.
boom is right behind him. So that little window right there,
Oh,
there you
okay.
go.
Okay.
So if it wasn't for him, man, I tell you, if you had a good RSO, a good backseater, he
Hmm.
can look out his window and he sees the wingtips of the tanker straight abeam him because he's looking out that window, and he can tell instantly if you're starting to fall behind. And he'll say, like Ocho would say, Berto, you're falling back, add power. Because I'm waiting for the director lights under the tanker to tell me I'm
Yeah.
going back because I don't have anything else to tell me, but they
Yeah.
delay. So Ocho, and he would lie to me. He'd go, "You only got another 1,000 pounds. You only got," because it was hard. It was the hardest thing to do. And so you're squunched down in your seat. You had to lower your seat all the way down. You were looking out of one side of the windshield because there was a splitter in the middle of that windshield. It was basically an F-106 windshield. So you're looking out one side, cocked, and you've got both engines in military power. That's full power before you go into afterburner.
Okay.
So as the airplane gets heavy, it's dogging. It's starting to get behind the power curve, and the more doggy it gets, the more power it takes to push through. So what you had to do is you had to put one in afterburner and pull the other one back, and it takes, I think, one potato, two potato, and it would light, boom, and then it would kick the airplane sideways. All this while you're trying to stay on that little stick. So the airplane's wiggling all around. And because if you drop the boom, it came out of the socket, like the boom operator
Hmm.
got scared and he retracted it or it separated on its own. It was hell to get back up to the tanker again because
Yeah.
you had to start all over. So you're burning almost as much fuel staying with the tanker at those high alpha slow speeds than you're putting in. So you never wanted to fall off the boom. And we were a great team. All the guys that were there was three of them that I flew with. They were all really good at motivating their pilot to get through the air refueling, because if you didn't, the mission was canceled. If you didn't get
Wow.
80,000 pounds at the end of AR, you had to go home. Well, first you had to go burn some down,
Yeah.
but you can't. The missions are planned so tight. You are a fuel emergency in the SR71 when you take off. In fact, that was what won me the job. It was me and a test pilot. I didn't know him, but we came in different days, and they put you in the simulator. They gave you some rudimentary. Here's here's how you change the radio. Here's how you set the engines. Here's the landing gear. All the rudimentary stuff. And they said your mission is to fly to, I think it was Barksdale, Texas, Barksdale, Louisiana, and back. And what you didn't know was they were going to give you a problem that brought you out of Mach 3, and now you can't get back, because this is the only airplane that ever made that you could fly further. You could fly further at Mach 3 than you can at subsonic. At subsonic, you're burning 80,000 pounds an hour. Supersonic, you're doing 60,000 pounds an hour, because the airplane is so efficient at that altitude. That's why it cruised at 80,000 feet, that you can go further up high than you can make back if you get low, because you're burning too much gas. So they failed our engine, or failed the hydraulics, I think it was. And we had to come down out of Mach 3, which means you got to come down low. And we we're burning so much fuel. I said, find us an alternate, preferably an Air Force base. And he found, I think it was Albuquerque. And I said, take us to Albuquerque. We got to get this thing on the ground. We're never going to make it back to Edwards. Well, the test pilot and his guy, they tried to make it back to Edwards and had to punch out.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm not saying I'm any God's gift to aviation. It's just one of the things you think of. You know, how much fuel? I know I'm burning 80,000 pounds subsonic. I'm burning 60,000 pounds supersonic. I'm now subsonic. Quick, do the math for me and tell me,
Yeah.
do we have enough to make it back? No, we don't. Let's find an alternate. It was that simple. And I had to do the simulator, and then I had to fly the T-38 to prove that I could fly the T-38, because that was our what they call continuation trainer. So when we weren't flying the SR, we got to fly the T-38, which was amazing. It's like having your own little sports car jet to fly anytime you wanted to. I missed that a lot. That was a lot of fun. So yes,
So
it
how many
leaked. Go
how many
ahead.
flights did you get on the flights or hours or whatever did you get on the SR71?
So I always tell people I only got 38 hours before they canceled it the second time, but I went a long way in 38 hours.
Oh yeah.
So it was very unfortunate. Ocho and I were getting ready to be checked out, mission ready, and there was people in the Air Force that didn't want the airplane. And this is when I started hating politics. So they wanted to cancel it before we got mission ready, because once we got mission ready, they would have to budget the airplane for
Mhm.
the next year. So I'm sitting in, there's a picture of the couch. We call it a couch. It's like a recliner. That's where you suited up, and they hooked you up to that yellow box that you always see astronauts
Mhm.
and stuff carrying.
Oh, here's the refueling picture. We were
Yep,
just
there you
talking about
go.
that.
See that big long yellow line under the tanker? And up at the front, that
Jeez.
lines you up. And then at the very front is a row of black black strips. And there's lights in there that tell you if you're moving forward or moving aft. And then the boom has an extender. It has red, green, and yellow. You want to stay in the green. If you start getting into yellow, the boom operator's like, you're falling back, sir. You're falling back. He's talking to you through an intercom.
Mhm.
And then if you get too far back, he's got to punch it off. He'll punch you off.
And he's looking at you through this little
Yes,
window right here, right?
right through there. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Those guys loved it. There was only 2 or 3 Q models. That tanker was special because it had a separate tank for JP7. So every Air Force tanker carries the fuel that every airplane needs. Well, the SR couldn't burn that fuel. It burned JP7. So that tanker had modified tanks and valves, so they could never run, because a tanker can burn its own carry gas, but this tanker couldn't because it
Mm.
was JP7.
Wow.
JP7, I witnessed it. You can throw a lit match into a tub of it and it goes out. It will not ignite. That's
And
just a
then
hero shot.
your top speed that I saw in your videos as well, Mach 3.2, is that correct?
That is correct.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so Ocho hero shots. That's
Is this the couch?
there you go. So that's suiting up. So I'm in that very position that the 2 techs aren't there, and the Lockheed program manager walks in, and he goes like this, and I go, "Oh, is the plane broken?" He's like, "No, they just canceled us."
Ugh.
That's how I found out. And I was,
Wow.
needless to say, all good things come to an end, but it came to an end abruptly. That's they canceled it, and so the photo by Ted Carlson that you see there was taken on October 10th of 97. That was the last flight.
That's my birthday,
No kidding.
October 10th.
No, there you go.
Sorry, buddy.
Just for reference, because I didn't know what this was, so I just looked it up. So Mach 3.2 in kilometers per hour is 3,951 kilometers per hour. In miles per hour, it's 2,455 miles an hour.
Okay,
Dang.
people, they hear that number and they go, "Wow, that's pretty fast." And
Fast.
let me tell you how you really know you're going fast. So on most modern airplanes, you have stuff called DME, distance measuring equipment. It's little drum counters that measure to a radio station, or if you've got nav equipment, nav equipment tells you how fast you're going and counts down the miles. So in the SR71, there was a mile on the counter every 2 seconds. You were going a mile every 2 seconds. Every 2 seconds, you were going a mile. That's where you really noticed you were going fast. You look out the window, no, looks like an airliner. But when you looked at the DME or your distance to the next turn point, it was going by a mile every 2 seconds. And we had
Wow.
what was called setback. So, I mean, we could go on all day. There's so much I could tell you. So setback and mission planning was when you started to roll for your turn. Because it took so long to set the turn and get the airplane carving, you would blow by your turn point if you waited to the turn point. So you had to start, and that's what Ocho's job was. It was on the mission plan. He'd say, "Okay, Berto, start your turn," and or if he was flying it through the autopilot, he'd say, "Turn's coming up, stand by," and the airplane would just roll. And the max bank we could do was 45 degrees because it was a 2G airplane. It could not pull Gs. It was very fragile. And that made the turn radius at Mach 3, 3.2, 75 miles. So 150 miles to do a 180.
Wow.
So people are like, well, 3.2, that's not very fast. Well, between 3.0 and 3.2 was a whole different set of planning templates for the mission planners, because you would not believe how bigger your turn radius was at 3.2 Mach. 3.2 Mach was the design speed of the airplane. That was when all the doors were closed and the engine was producing the maximum amount of thrust for the least amount of fuel, 3.2 Mach. Anything slower or faster was wasting gas. And my job up front was to look at a chart, which I can't even begin to do today. On my knees, you see in this picture, there's two patches of Velcro. One was a performance for a performance checklist, and the other was for your checklist. And the performance checklist, I'd look at my altitude. So let's say it was 79,000 feet. I'd look at the temperature, and I would go chase a little chart down and over, and it would say, you need to be at 75,020 feet. That's how tight it was. And so I would roll a pitch wheel down on my right side where my hand would rest, and that would start like a 20 foot per minute climb. That's all I did the whole time, was climb to keep our fuel burn on the curve. Because if you stayed inefficient, you were going to run out of gas.
Wow.
It was the hardest airplane I've ever flown. You couldn't. In fact, I don't have a lot of pictures from the window, because every time and it was a big joke amongst all the guys that flew the airplane as pilots. The minute you took your eyes off the instrument panel, something bad happened in the airplane. And get an unstart or hydraulic failure. So you were constantly hawking the instruments in front of you, making sure the inlets were running, making sure the CG, you had to change the CG from a forward CG to an aft CG, because the center of pressure would change and cause the airplane to pitch down. Wow. So you had to keep that CG center of pressure relationship tracking as the airplane went faster and faster. And that was all manually done by the pilot. It was the most intense. You could go a long way in 2 hours, but I tell you what, 2 hours, I've flown that. In contrast, the U-2, my longest mission was 9.5, and I fell asleep for 20 minutes.
So, like
the SR71, you could not do that in the SR71.
And there goes my comment before about you flying like the craziest planes, right? So not only did you get to fly the SR71, but then you got to fly the U-2. So
yeah,
I mean, which that's another special airplane, right? I mean,
so I tell people I flew the fastest and the slowest airplane in the U.S. inventory in a year. In a year, I was checked out to fly the U-2. I went to the U-2 because all the Lockheed guys said, stay in the suit, keep your high altitude currency, go fly the U-2. We're coming back. It was an illegal. The Air Force couldn't line us out of the budget. There was this big battle going on. And so I went and I applied to fly the U-2. And I got that job because I so happened to have a commercial sailplane certificate, and I had a lot of sailplane time, and it was just a glider with a motor in the back. So it was as the SR was the hardest to refuel, the U-2 was the hardest airplane I've ever landed in my life. Somebody,
Yeah.
not me, but somebody said one time, it's like sitting on a unicycle in the back of a pickup truck with a bucket on your head with 2 eye holes, and somebody pushes you off the back of it, and you got to stay.
I've seen the landings online.
Yeah.
Of
Yes.
U2,
Yes.
and it's like a symphony of like
Yes.
craziness. Like it
Yes.
just looks like a whole.
Much like the Navy and the Air Force, they filmed every landing in the U-2 and they critiqued you. So after the mission, combat photography would run the tape over, and you'd sit in the briefing room and you'd look at your landings and go, that was good, that was bad, don't do that, do it this way. The airplane only had like a 12-knot crosswind limit because the wings are so long. If you tried to bank, so we can't crab and land in most airplanes. You need to bank into the wind and then kick it out and touch down. Yeah, there she is, the Dragon Lady. Yep.
Which one?
I was in my anarchy years there, so I grew a mustache. That was like taboo in the Air Force.
Which one would you like flying better? Is there?
They each had their special things they did, and there was no glory in the U-2. And I'm not a glory seeker, but I'll tell you this: when we were at Edwards, we ate at the NASA Cafe at the Dryden Test Facility, now known as the Armstrong Test Facility. And we'd eat at their cafeteria. And every time we went there, which was every day for lunch, somebody would walk up to our table and ask for our autographs on posters or T-shirts or whatever. And the U-2 is probably the hardest job for an Air Force pilot. That's unsung heroes. Nobody knows what you do, where you're going. You're up for hours at a time, and hostile. The U-2 was very, very uncomfortable, and you had a condom catheter to pee in because there's no way you're going to go 9 hours without having to go to the bathroom. And then of course everybody's like, well, where did you poop? Well, that's where if you Google U-2 and breakfast, they'll talk about they always had these traditional low residue diets so that you get your system to where you would go fly the airplane and not have to do that.
Yeah.
But if you did, you had to come home because you couldn't sit in that mess for.
Yeah.
But what I also tell people is, you know how you've heard that term, that's about as funny as a fart in a spacesuit? There's no smell because when you put the helmet on, there's a neoprene hood that seals around your face, and the air behind you is CO2 that you just breathed out, and the air in front of you comes through 2 regulators and it blows down in front of your eyes. It's nice and cool, and it's 100% oxygen. You had to breathe 100% oxygen or you'd get the bends. And so you never smelled. The only time you smelled something funky like body odor or whatever was when you took your helmet off. And I felt so sorry for the PEs, the techs that would unsuit you, because they had to deal with that every time. You're sweating in this thing. We wore Chinese underwear. The suits were identical in the SR and the U-2. The difference is I was only in the suit 2 hours in the SR, where 9 hours in the U-2. So you're doing a full day's 8 hours days work at 70,000+ feet in a pressure suit.
And then so you guys are. It says I'm just looking on the internet here. On the U-2, you're 85,000 feet. Is that kind of where you'd normally be, or were you kind of up and down depending on conditions or something?
That's a really good question. So now we're getting into the realm where they still fly the U-2, so I can't tell you specific numbers.
Okay.
But you bring up a very good point. So in the U-2, you had what was called Mach hold. Now this will blow you away. The cruise Mach for the U-2 was 0.715. 0.715. That equates to 7 miles a minute versus what we were just talking about, a mile every 2 seconds. But when you put above I don't remember when you clicked on the autopilot. You climbed out at 300 knots until you reached your climb Mach or your cruise Mach, and then you started leveling off. And you'd put the autopilot on Mach hold, and it would surf due to temperature. So as the
Oh, okay.
temperature would change, if it got warmer, the airplane would come down, and then
Mhm.
as it got colder, it would go back up.
Hmm.
And I mean, I can admit this now. I was over Bosnia. I was doing that Bosnia thing out of Sigonella. We're flying over out of Italy into that Bosnia conflict,
Mhm.
and I'm flying along the coast, and I'm near Montenegro, and I hear, "Sir, sir, sir," on the intercom. Now we're data linked from the ground. There's no radio. It's all it's a
Oh,
data
okay.
link. It's only going to my airplane. And I wake up and I realize I've been asleep for 20 minutes. So, you okay? Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Thanks. Yeah, yeah, sorry. Yeah, everything's good. Anyway, in the YouTube, there's a picture. There's a picture I gave you of it looks like a tube of toothpaste, but it's the throttle quadrant. So we can
Jeez.
yeah, it's dark. You can see the Terminator when the sun shadow starts to
Is
set. You could in
so
the S. There you go. So the right stick is the throttle. We'll talk about the tube food here in a second. So we called it the on-off switch because on a mission, when the guy in the Camaro would drive around you and check for anything leaking and all and any pins weren't pulled, and then he'd come up beside you, he'd give you a thumbs up, and then he would salute, and then you would salute him back, and you would take that throttle and you'd put thrust lever, whatever you want to call it, it's called throttle here, you'd push it to the firewall, and you would never touch it again until you had to come down in the U2.
Wow.
So you just left it at full power the whole time. In fact, in the U2, at 70,000 feet, it takes 45 minutes to get back down to pattern altitude. That's
wow.
pulling the throttle to idle, putting the speed brakes out, reflexing the ailerons and the flaps, and throwing the landing gear down. I don't remember if I said that. So you got all the drag out, and you do that at 70 plus thousand feet. You don't wait. You just throw it all down and you grab the throttle and you pull it to idle. So
And it
the
takes
engine goes
45
from
minutes.
I don't know, 95% RPM down to like 89% because the ECU, if you will, like we have in our turbines, is
Mhm.
telling the fuel controller, no, 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 he's too high. Don't go to idle yet. So the whole time
Oh,
you've got thrust as you're coming down, and it's shaking and it's about because you got the speed brakes out and the ailerons are reflexed and the landing
yeah.
gear's down. Now, if you lost a motor, if you were up at 70 plus thousand feet and the motor quit, it takes over an hour to get down because you don't have hydraulics. The engine can't windmill. It's so thin up there, and the gearbox is so tight that the engine
Yeah.
will stop. So you have the gear free falls, but it only free falls to about 20 degrees or so.
Yeah.
And remember, you only have one main gear. Just the bicycle main is all that you
Yeah.
have, and the tail wheel. And so it could take you longer to come down when you lost a motor in the U2. And so
Wow.
the trick was you want to save your battery, which is only good for 30 minutes. So you fire off a radio saying, "Here I am. I've lost an engine. I'll contact you in 20 minutes." And you turn everything off. There was no U2. Basically, they took a Piper Cub avionics system and threw it into a jet glider. It had cables for
Wow.
all the controls. We called it fly by wire because it was a cable. There was no boost. There was nothing. Everything was you could turn that airplane completely off and glide it around all day long.
Wow.
So it
Um,
surprises me, and I'm not knocking it, but with the speed and everything, and with all of the modern technology in the world now, it surprises me that they're still flying it like it's still a viable aircraft.
So I don't want to. I can't go too much in detail, but what I'll tell you is, and you can picture this. In the day, back during the 60s and the 70s, the Cold War, it was a lot of camera work, taking
Right.
pictures of the ground, seeing where the troops are. In today's environment, it's a more electronic surveillance.
Right.
So it is
Mm.
just so picture taking a pickup truck and kitting it out with a Mod Deuce machine gun, and then taking that same pickup truck and putting like a laser gun on the back of it. It's the
Mhm.
Right.
same vehicle, but the technology is being used differently. So today it's very viable. I
It just
spent
seems like a slow moving target.
well,
I'm sorry to,
oh no. You're up there at 70 plus thousand feet doing Mach 0.7, which I can't show you the picture. I've got a picture of what's called the triple display indicator. It shows you true airspeed, indicated airspeed, and Mach, and it shows 80 knots indicated. So I'm at whatever altitude. I can't. That's why I can't show it to you. And
Right,
I'm
right, right.
only doing 80 knots indicated, but I'm
Wow.
doing 7 miles a minute because the air molecules are so far apart.
Yeah.
Your indicated airspeed is very, very slow. So you'd sit up there and just I had I was a spy pilot, and I had
Right.
plausible deniability because I had no idea what they were looking at. Daisy May, hush. I had no idea what the ground guys were listening to or looking at.
Yeah.
Right.
So if I got shot down or had to bail out over enemy territory, I really didn't know. I
Right,
just
right,
knew I
right.
was supposed to go here and orbit,
You're just the pilot.
just to
It's
just a
so
driver.
I think about the same thing. I obviously I follow a lot of this stuff, and I read a lot about the aviation stuff and military stuff and stuff like that. I have the same questions about like the B-52, right? It's like in today's day and age, with everybody else's technology kind of catching up to ours, the
Sorry.
B-52 is kind of like a big, slow moving target. Like it's like I know it's just my
I flew
thought
that
process.
so every airplane I've flown was my age, because they were all born in the 60s, 61, and they're all flying except for the SR.
Right.
The U-2 still flying at 60 something years old. The B-52 has been re-engined to go another, I think, 20 years. I think they said.
I thought I read they were going to try to keep it in service until 2050.
So I could speak on the B-52 because I flew it. I flew every seat, right seat, left seat, and instructor. That is a very capable airplane. There is no other airplane that can carry as many bombs. If you're going after a land grab and you're trying to bomb somebody back to the
Mhm.
Stone Age, the B-52 is what you're going to send. And in fact, in Vietnam, there were stories that were coming back that from the prisoners of war were saying all the guards or the interrogators wanted to know was when the next B-52 strike was going to happen. It
Yeah.
scared them to death. So
Yeah.
that was the Rolling Thunder campaign where you would just hear bombs. I can't remember. I went to Red Flag and we carried, I want to say we carried 12 750s on each wing for 24. And I don't remember how many we could carry in the bomb bay. That's a crap ton of bombs.
Yeah.
Just
So what's the top speed of a B-52 approximately?
540 knots.
Right.
But you don't want to fly it fast. Most all airplanes ever made, even civilian, always have these top numbers, but those are only numbers that are good for like 3 minutes. You don't want to go do
Mhm.
it all day long. And the problem with the B-52, when you start getting really fast, the wings start to twist from aerodynamic, the change of pressure along the wing. In fact, if you look at a B-52, it's got those two big tip tanks on it.
Mhm.
Those are harmonic balancers. You had to leave fuel. You could not use the fuel in those tip tanks.
Wow.
That kept the wings from fluttering.
Wow.
That
Wow.
airplane, I've been 500 down at 200 feet off the ground, and it's bouncing you around. I've been 540 knots in an F-111 200 feet off the ground, and it's like riding in a Cadillac because that airplane was very heavily wing loaded, so you didn't feel bumps in that airplane. They call out severe turbulence, and we just wouldn't even bat an eye. And the B-52, I bounced my helmet off the ejection hatch because the turbulence so bad you couldn't see the instrument panel. That's scary.
Wow. Yeah.
But it's a lightly
So,
wing loaded airplane compared to the others.
so Bert, if they were to do the SR71 today, let's say they redid it, they rebuilt it,
Mm-hmm.
would all the modern electronics, would number one, would they put that in there, and number two, would it make the flying of the plane easier? Like you're
Oh,
talking about switching the CG and everything, that could all be automated now,
oh, there
correct?
wouldn't even be a pilot in it.
Yeah,
The
yeah, that makes
and I
sense.
think there's something out there right now. I've been hearing and seeing stories. I know you never know what you see and hear to be true, but I remember I remember them talking about the stealth fighter when I was a second lieutenant, and I didn't believe it until I was actually briefed in on the program because the EF-111 flew with the stealth fighter.
Mm,
So I'm like, are you kidding me? This is really exists. So there's probably something they're working on right now that's UAV that can go
mhm,
mock whatever. But
Yeah.
yes, the technology um, today would make it way easy.
yeah.
So
All right. So go to the tube food. What?
oh
What
yeah,
is
yeah. So in the SR71 we had tube food in the SR71 and the U2 we had it. Well, Bert ain't eating no food in the SR71. I can't take my hand off the controls long enough to eat anything without the airplane rolling over and trying to kill me. But in the U2, because I could take a nap, I could eat all I wanted. So so my favorite was apple pie and sloppy Joe. And
Oh my gosh.
I don't have a picture of it, but straight down where the trim wheels are is just slightly behind that in that picture is a round heater, and you slid your tube in there and set a little clicky, like a oven timer, click, 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 and it would clockwork down, tick, 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 tick. So you'd set it for, I don't know, 2, 3 minutes, and it'd heat that food up. And then you take that probe, and if you go back to the helmet picture, there's one that shows the port,
Hold on. When we get
and
there,
you stick that in your right
right
there.
here.
So right there, just off the end of my name, is the port, and you stick the tube food in there, and then of course your head is swimming around in the helmet. You can move your
Yeah.
head all over the place. So you stick it in and you move your mouth over to where it is and then squeeze. You had to be careful if you heated it though, because there's no testing it before you stick it in the helmet. But
So
Sloppy
Anthony,
Joe and
Anthony,
apple
if you go
pie.
forward one more picture to that cockpit picture,
Oh, hold on.
other direction. So that's in the U2?
yes, and
Wow.
so when I flew it, it didn't have the modernization program. That's a periscope right there that
Jeez.
actually it looks below the airplane. So it's like looking through a rifle scope. You got to get your
Yeah.
head just right. And there's crosshairs. There's a bunch of stuff. I don't quite remember. We didn't use it much, but that was back when the pilot controlled the camera. So you could look through that thing and see your track and your target, your subject coming up, and then trigger the camera. And the U2 had the same squint controls, although the camera didn't have to work too hard at
Mhm.
0.7 Mach. But that's what that is. And they took all those out and put glass cockpits in the current U2 fleet. So those are
When I see
gone
that
now.
picture, it looks like, to me, to the layman, it looks like you're in space. Looks like you're in a spaceship. That's what it looks like to me. It's
It,
nuts.
it that you can see the curvature of the earth.
Yeah.
There's a picture. Go to the one where there's one off the wingtip. I saw it earlier. Um, and yes, so those clouds are going up to about 30,000 feet, and I'm 40,000 feet above them.
Wow.
I had
Jeez.
a thunderstorm picture, but I don't know where it went. So the thunderstorm was up to 60,000, and I was 20,000 above it. So you only have to worry coming
Crazy.
down. You're not going to up at once you pass 50,000 feet,
Mhm.
the or 50 to 60, the temperature is minus 56, and there's no wind.
There's no nothing.
No, there isn't. But there are temperature spikes, and just a few degrees will make the engine or the airplane perform better or worse.
Oh, okay.
So that's why
Wow.
the U2 would surf along in the temperature regime,
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to hold that Mach number.
Yeah.
Look, we do that with some of the gliders, with some of the flight controllers, with the RC stuff. You call it thermaling, where you can just
Yeah.
your plane will just ride off the thermals, and you could do it with a modern flight controller now, and you could stay up and it'll just hang
Find
out
them
on
and
the
go.
thermals.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll stay up for hours. Just thermaling.
Surprisingly, because I had a glider background, I tried it in the pattern, and I was able to. I mean, I didn't climb a big time, but I had zero. The motor was back in idle. I was simulating to simulate a flamed out approach, which you had to do so many of every year. You pulled the throttle back to a charted setting just above idle and to put the speed brake out, and that simulated how the airplane would fly if the motor was dead. And I noticed I wasn't coming down, so I started circling. I called the tower. I was at Beale Air Force Base, and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna do a 360 out here if you don't mind." They're like, "Yeah, go ahead, sir." And I was in a thermal in the U2, and it wasn't coming down. I was like,
Yeah.
"Yes." I didn't climb any, but I didn't come down. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a motor
Super
glider.
cool.
It's a motor glider.
Yeah, it is. There's the whole community of people who do that with RC stuff off of cliffs
Yeah.
and mountains and stuff.
Yeah.
They do thermaling for
There's
hours at a
There's a
time.
lot of that on my YouTube channel.
So bringing it back to the RC world, I'm curious what your next jet is, your next turbine aircraft.
Okay, so I've got a couple things. Man, it's a long saga. As you know, I'm not telling somebody that doesn't know. There's stuff I've ordered that's still floating around. So supposedly, I'm getting a Tomahawk Hawk XL because
Cool.
I really want to break into scale. I like scale. I like scale. Scale is me. I'm a full scale jet guy. I know how to fly models scale. So this airplane is just coming painted. I told the factory I ordered it through BVM. I said, please, please, please do not stencil it. Do not put markings on it.
Yeah.
Do not weather it. I just want the scheme, and then I'm going to do the rest. So that's going to be one of my projects. I don't even know when it's going to show up. It's a long story. Anyway, and then I have in the garage, I have another PC-21. So I loved the JMB Jets Wind RC PC-21. However, it had a bunch of faults.
Yeah.
And before Fred Pan, who is a great guy, before he left Wind RC, the salesman he is, he's to his word. I sent him a list and I said, Fred, I want another one, but you have to fix these things.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it's out of the crate, but it's not all taken apart. I don't have room to put it on the build table yet. They've done it. So we'll see. That will probably be a build review of that PC-21.
Nice.
It's just a great airplane. I just put a short up this afternoon with Allie flying mine. It's just so cool to see that airplane, to hear that airplane. It's a cool. So the scheme, I'm working with a guy in Australia, a very good guy. He's a museum curator for the Royal Australian Air Force. And he's been sending me pictures because I got it painted, but just in the primer. So this PC-21 will be, it's an easy paint scheme. It's going to be gray. There's 4 PC-21s in the 4th squadron that are forward air control trainers, and they're gray, and they have the shark's mouth and the eyeball.
Oh yeah.
And it's a real easy scheme, but it looks stunning. And so I'm getting tailor-made decals in Germany to do my paint stencils and my stenciling. And they also did my so I don't have the Hawk, but I got the stencils. I have the PC-21, but I don't have the decals. So I'm in this dilemma. So I'm working on other stuff right now. I built 2 helicopters that need to be made because I'm a helicopter guy also. I fixed 2 helicopters that needed a clutch and a new flybar system. And then I've got a Tomahawk Swift right behind me that is getting ready for next season. I really enjoy, I like scale soaring, but it's like fishing. You know, for me, fishing is boring. You cast your line out and you catch one, you're done. It's like a thermal. Yeah, there you go. That's it. That's it right there.
What motor are you putting in the PC-21?
King Tech 100. I've got one. I'm going to strip everything out of my current PC-21. It has issues, and I'm not going to go into it because I'm not going to bash without giving a fair shake to fix the issues. But it's being stripped, and I will put them in this airplane. Put the motor.
I love the PC-21. I'm a fan.
It's a beautiful airplane. It's so it turns so many heads at the field when you bring up any turboprop, really, to be quite honest. The sound. First of all, turbine RC is the most realistic RC ever, right? The sound, the smell, and then you throw turboprop on it, and it's except for there's no controllable propeller, it's even more realistic. So easy scheme. 54. Mine's going to be 54049. It has the 100th anniversary flash on the tail, just because it was dolled up a little more. And if I entered it in scale contest, I got tons of pictures of that airplane. So so those 2 airplanes are coming. I have a Top RC Voyager that I've lost interest in it now because and I'm not. You've dealt with EA airplanes. What can I say, man? They just know how to do a sport jet. So the Voyager is a cool airplane. I'll finish it. I got everything I need to finish it, but I've just lost interest in that airplane since I've flown the BDX and the Picaro. Probably build it and sell it. Finish it and sell it. I also have an A10 down in the basement that's been stalled for 2 years.
Who's the friend? Skymaster or Maibel?
No, it's a T1.
Oh, okay.
So, and like I said, it's not what I thought it would be. So it's stalled. Probably somebody would love to have it. I might finish it and sell it, or sell it as a project. It's got 2 King Tech G4 100s in it, never been run. It's got everything you need. I'm Jetty and Spectrum. I do both. I wear both hats. So that one was set up for Jetty and a Cortex. But I'm really liking the Spectrum Synapse. And I'm not your number one jet guy, but I can hold my own. And I'm telling you, there's a difference between those gyros. And when you hit that stop, the crispness, I'm gonna get my hand. When you stop, that thing is dead nuts on, and pretty much
Synapse.
The Synapse.
I've
The
actually
Cortex,
heard
you
some
can
good
get there
stuff
with the Cortex too. And I'm not bashing the Cortex. I got 4 of them. I used to be envious of you. You'd always pull out a Cortex, and I couldn't get them. I'm like, how is John? What has he got, a case of them down there? Because they were always out of stock. So when I could get them, I would.
I'm not a Spectrum fan, and I've actually heard some decent things about the Synapse.
It's a good system. It really is. And radios is like religion and oil and car brands. But listen, the way I look at it, I can fly them all. I talk Futaba, I talk Free Sky, I talk Spectrum, and I talk Jetty. And I'm going to tell you, my Spectrum guys aren't going to like this, but to me, the Jetty is the most intuitive radio I've ever programmed. It really is. I mean, there's no people poo-poo that, but it just makes sense when you look at it. Once you got to get your head around the way they call. The hardest for me was JR, and then the second hardest was Futaba, because Futaba had to go and do everything different from everybody else.
A lot of random things backwards.
Right, but it goes back to stick with what you like.
Yeah.
It's sort of like owning cameras. I do photography. I do still photography and video photography. Stick with a system that you like
Yeah.
because you're going to collect receivers or you're going to collect lenses or
Right.
and just stay with it. They're all good. The bashing comes when somebody just wants to blame the radio, and
Hmm.
it's I mean, to be quite honest, it's 99% of the time it's pilot error. It's not
Yes.
radio error.
Yes.
And so all the radios on today's market are outstanding. They're all safe. They all work well. Just stick with what you like. Don't be afraid to try something different. And for my helicopters, I'm a V-bar guy because it just makes
Hmm.
sense to me.
Hmm.
The V-bar, I flew my first RC helicopter in 1989. It was a Colt Baron 30 with no gyro and hard laminated oak rotor blades. And uh, uh, it took me 2 days to get the throttle curve set because you had to bolt it to a stand with cinder blocks and run it up and sit
Oh
under
my
it with your
gosh.
tachometer and go. "Rrr." Now with the V-bar system, I'm 3 minutes, and I'm not
Yeah.
exaggerating. 3 minutes, I am safe to go take it out back and fly it off
Yeah.
the patio. It's just that's technology.
Yeah.
It's a good system. I'm not trying to sell V-bar, but that's the one I use. All my helicopters have V-bar in it. I'm not a
Hmm.
smack 3D guy. I'm a smooth old man aerobatic guy, but I love
Hmm.
helicopters. For me, is easy. I can take it out the back door here and go fly. And if
Yeah.
it's a nice day in the winter, and I think it was 1922, I'm sorry, 2022, 1922, 2022, I think every day that the sun was out, I flew a helicopter.
Oh, cool.
Even if it was in the teens, because you're only for an electric, you're only out there 3 minutes. So you
Yeah. Yeah.
boot it up in the house, take it out, set it down, fly it, and then come back in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a jack, like my Facebook page says, I'm a jack of all trades. I'm a master
Yeah.
of none. I enjoy everything. I don't bash what other people like. Let them do what they want to do.
Right.
I will disagree with you though, Jonathan. Helicopter pilots are you said something about you're not a real pilot unless you're a jet pilot. Helicopter pilots, that's and I'm not God's gift to helicopter flying, but that is the most challenging RC you'll ever do. And
Well, I'm
because you've
glad I
flown
started
helicopters.
with yeah, that's what actually got me started
Yeah.
in RC was helicopters. And now when I go back and fly a heli, it's like, oh my gosh, I need to fly this tail all over the place, right? So if I try and do pattern work with my heli, it's hard. Takes
I know.
a lot more
And
thinking.
that brings me to why I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. I'm not a
Hmm.
good at any one discipline, but I can do them all just
Hmm.
because you bounce between them all the time. You don't really stick with one
Yeah.
and make it. I competed in IMAC for many, many years, and I just realized after a while that competition wasn't my thing. I enjoyed IMAC. I
Hmm.
thought it was good. It's a good discipline to do something cool with your airplane and be precise. It taught me a lot, flying straight lines, angles, curves, but the
Yeah.
whole contest part of it, I enjoyed judging, but
Yeah.
I didn't go there to go win a piece of paper at the end of the day. I went there to hang out with my buds and go to
Yeah.
dinners and do all that kind of stuff. And then I found the jet world. The jet world is the same. I'm not trying to be somebody's superstar. I'm just having a good time, forwarding the hobby, helping people that need help. Pablo and Scott asked me if I would be a team pilot, and I jumped at the
Hmm.
chance. And so I'm a spokesperson for them. And I'm hopefully in the 2025 season, I can do a few just old man style demos. I'm not gonna do a Pablo 30G.
Yeah.
That guy is good. There's several outstanding jet pilots out there. Um,
Yes,
to,
there is.
to me, the turbine world wasn't anything hard. It was just different.
Hmm.
It's still an airplane.
Yeah.
There's just I guess what bites people is the lag. You can't just
Yes.
wait to the last second to go around. You got to make a decision. You can't wait to the last second to abort. All these things cross over very well from full scale jet
Yeah.
flying. So
Cool.
All right, I think we're getting towards the end here.
Oh man, I
Bert.
could talk for another hour.
Well, you know what? Maybe we'll have you back on halfway through
Absolutely.
the season and see how the shows and everything are going.
Absolutely.
Always welcome to come back on. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, Bert, this was tons of fun. It's I
I
mean,
could listen to you talking about
yeah,
the SR71 and
absolutely.
the U2 and everything for hours too. But
So just remember there's tons of information on both airplanes on the internet. What I provide is a firsthand experience of what I did. I can't,
right.
people ask me all the time certain numbers and stuff. I can't remember. I've learned so many airplanes in 35 plus years,
Mhm.
37 plus years of flying that when a new one comes, the old one leaves. So,
Yeah.
but the experiences I still remember like it was. I can talk about any Air Force jet I flew. The airlines is boring, but I was also when I left, I was a check airman and a test pilot for Southwest Airlines, which I thoroughly enjoyed. If I could have just stayed there and done that, I would have stayed and done that. I helped bring the Max back online. That was fun. That's probably if they said you can go start your career over again, what would you do? I'd be in flight test. I
Wow.
enjoy it. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Also,
We
thank you for your service too. I
oh,
mean,
thanks.
yeah. If anybody's
absolutely.
interested, being in Canada, we don't have a lot of air museum stuff. But when I was in Tucson last year, the air museum there, they've got an SR71, and you can walk. I mean, you can walk up and touch it, and walk underneath and see the gear openings and stuff. So
Yeah.
So I have a
it's
story
cool.
about that. I actually did the talk on that airplane when they unveiled it because we were in Tucson and somebody said, "Hey, they're unveiling the Tucson plane. Would you mind doing a talk?" And I'm like,
Oh,
"Absolutely."
cool.
And at the time, that was, I don't know if it still is, but the only flyable museum piece because they just towed it over from the airport. All the
Wow.
other airplanes, when they go to museums, they get their wings cut to
Yeah.
fit on trucks,
Yeah.
so they can never fly again. But back then, that airplane supposedly can just come right back if they wanted to. We could do a whole nother show on the cool things about the SR71.
Cool.
One of them is there was no rubber in the engine, so
Yeah.
there's no seals to go bad. They took an engine out of a gate guard, a gate display in Omaha, and put it in an airplane, and I flew it a week later.
Wow.
They were washing it with a water hose. They were spraying it down, and birds' nests were coming off, and I rolled the window down. I said, "What are y'all doing?" He's like, "Oh, we're getting ready to put this engine in 976. You're gonna fly it next week." I'm like, "No kidding. Really?" Because there was nothing to deteriorate. It was all titanium, aluminum, gold, Inconel.
Wow.
Everything was hydromechanical. There were no electronics that ran the engine. Everything was a pump, and all that linkage that drove all the different doors and guide vanes is all hydromechanical. The fuel did that. The fuel went through the
Wow.
engine, did its job, and then went through the back and out the tailpipe.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a cool airplane. It's
Yeah.
really,
Super
I'm
cool.
glad I can talk about it because there are a
Yeah.
lot of people that are interested in it.
You never know. They might bring one back one day, you know? It's
Well, I'm done.
yeah.
They had their chance to call me like 20 years ago, and they did.
I was just reading the other day they were thinking about bringing back the Nighthawk, the 117.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah,
You'd
there's
think they would
talk
have.
about possibly bringing that back for a little bit. I don't know.
Hmm.
It's like I said, I read a lot of interesting stuff
Yeah,
about all
that's
that
good.
stuff.
I like
Yeah. Right.
aviation's been my life since I was in high school. So,
So I was the opposite. Getting into more of the airplane stuff kind of got me into the history of some of the cooler military aircraft and stuff like that. So then I end up just reading random stories and facts and stuff about all that stuff and learning a lot about it.
so one of my newfound loves is history because when I was a kid, I hated history. I didn't want to learn
Mhm.
about what happened. I wanted to go fly models and learn how to do things. And
Right.
now that I've gotten older, I'm like, I don't understand what happened. So I'm enamored.
Right.
I really like learning about history, not just World War II, World War One, Vietnam. Even I mean, the Vietnam guys are getting old now, and just
Yeah.
anything aviation related history that I didn't understand, I dig into it. It's interesting when I'm
Yeah.
not doing a million other things over here.
It's been a pleasure, Bert.
Awesome.
We will
Thanks, guys.
definitely have
Thanks,
you back
Anthony. Thanks,
on.
Jonathan. It's been a pleasure. I love talking, as you can see. So anytime you want me back, if you want me to talk about something, I will. Please have the folks go by and check out my YouTube channel. I think it's
betcha.
something they
I'm
may.
gonna link it. I'll link it in the description.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I think it's something that people will enjoy. There's a ton of competition out there, and I'm not trying to compete. I'm trying to fill that niche. People want to see landings, they want to see takeoffs, they want to see things fly. And 2025, right now I'm just unveiling stuff that I've been sitting on, but 2025, I'm going to tailor it to what people are asking for. Music, people want music, people want no music. It goes back. So I'm going to do, somebody's like, for the millionth time, no music, just ambient. And I'm like, first of all, I don't even know who you are. And so you haven't even talked to me one time, much less a million. But anyway, so I'm like, fine, it's easy. I am a video editor. I know how to do all that stuff. I'm just going to do 2 videos. I'll just mute the music
no music,
and just post them both up.
Yeah.
2 for 1. Anyway, it's fun. I'm talking, you guys know the YouTube for me is interesting. 2 weeks and it's been quite interesting.
No, it's
Very
great.
cool.
Very enjoyable. It's as you know, it's cool when people are interested in what you're showing them.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it just spurs you on to keep going. So that's my plan.
Cool.
All right, gents. Bert,
Thanks,
once
guys.
again, thank you. We will be in touch. John, have a good night.
You as well. Thanks,
Anthony,
guys.
thank you so much. Jonathan, keep up the good work. Thank you
Thank
as
you.
well. And anytime you want me back, I'll be more than happy to sit and talk with you guys.
We'll take you up on that. Have a good night, gents.
Adios.
Awesome. Good night, guys.